Chapter 14 of A Firm of Girdlestone by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ashton Hoffman. A Slight Misunderstanding. The revelation of the real state of the firm's finances was a terrible blow to Ezra Girdlestone. To a man of his overbearing, tempestuous disposition, failure and poverty were bitter things to face. He had been wont to tread down before him all such little difficulties and obstacles as came across him in his former life. Now he encountered a great barrier which could not be possessed so easily, and he raged and chafed before it. It made him still more wroth to think that the fault was none of his. All his life he had reckoned as a matter of course that when his father passed away he would be left almost a millionaire. A single half-hour's conversation had shattered his delusion and left him face to face with ruin. He lost his sleep and became restless and hollow-eyed. Once or twice he was seen the worse for drink in the daytime. He was a man of strong character, however, and though somewhat demoralized by the sudden shock, he threw away no point in the game which he and his father were playing. He saw clearly that only a bold stroke could save them. He therefore threw himself heart and soul into the diamond scheme, and worked out the details in a masterly manner. The more he looked into it, the more convinced he became, not only of its feasibility, but of its absolute safety. It seemed as though it were hardly possible that it should fail. Among other things, he proceeded to qualify himself as a dealer in diamonds. It happened that he was acquainted with one of the partners of the firm of Fudger and Stultz, who did the largest import trade in precious stones. Through his kindness he received particularly instructions in the variety and value of diamonds, and learned to detect all those little flaws and peculiarities which are only visible to the eye of an expert, and yet are of the highest importance in determining the price of a stone. With such opportunities Ezra made rapid progress. Within a few weeks there were not many dealers in the trade who had better grasp of the subject. Both Girdlestones recognized that the success of their plan depended very largely upon the choice of an agent, and both were of the opinion that Major Toby's Clutterbuck they had just the man that they were in want of. The younger merchant had long felt vaguely that the Major's social position, combined with his impetuosity and the looseness of his morality, as inferred from his mode of life, might some day make him a valuable agent under delicate circumstances. As to the old soldier's own inclinations, Ezra flattered himself that he knew the man's nature to a nicety. It was simply a question of the price to be paid. No doubt the figure would be substantial, but he recognized with a trader's instincts that the article was a superior one, and he was content to allow for the quality in estimating the value. Early one April afternoon the Major was strutting down St. James Street, frock-coated and kid-gloved, with protuberant chest and glittering shoes, which peeped out from beneath the daintiest of gaiters. Young Girdlestone, who had been on the lookout from a club window, ran across and intercepted him. "How are you, my dear Major?" he cried, advancing upon him with outstretched hand, and as much show of gentility as his nature permitted. "How do you do? How do you do?" said the other somewhat pompously. He had made up his mind that nothing was to be done with the young man, and yet he was reluctant to break entirely with one whose purse was well lined and who had supporting proclivities. "I've been wishing to speak with you for some days, Major," said Ezra. "When could I see you?" "You'll never see me any plainer than you do at this very moment," the old soldier answered, taking a sidelong glance of suspicion at his companion. "Ah, but I wish to speak to you quietly on a matter of business," the young merchant persisted. "It's a delicate matter which may need some talking over, And above all, it is a private matter. Ged, said Major, with a wheezy laugh. You'd have thought I wanted to borrow money if I had said as much. Look here now, we'll go into White's private billiard room, and I'll let you have 200 out of 5 for a tenner, though it's as good as handing you the money to offer you such odds. You can talk this over while we play. No, Major, urged the junior partner. I tell you it is a matter of the greatest importance to both of us. Can you meet me at Nelson's Cafe at 4 o'clock? I know the manager, and he'll let us have a private room. I'd ask you round to me own place, the Major said, but it's rather too far. Nelson's at 4, right you are. Punctuality is next to godliness, as old Willingby of Buffs used to say. You didn't know Willingby, eh? Gad, he was second to a man at Gibb in 47. He brought his man on the ground, but the opponents didn't turn up 2 minutes after time. Willoughby wanted his man to leave. Teach him punctually, he said. Can't be done, said the man. Must be done. Willoughby, out of the question, said the man, and wouldn't budge. Willoughby persisted. There were high words and a quarrel. The doctor put him up at 15 paces, and the man shot Willoughby through the calf of the leg. Was a mortar. Punctuality 4 o'clock. Bye-bye. The Major nodded pleasantly and swaggered away, flourishing his little cane jauntily in the air. In spite of his admiration of punctuality, as exemplified in the person of Willoughby of the Buffs, the Major took good care to arrive at the trysting place somewhat behind the appointed time. It was clear to him that some service or other was expected of him, and it was obvious his game, therefore, to hang back and not appear to be too eager to enter into young Girdlestone's views. When he presented himself at the entrance of Nelson's Cafe, the young merchant had been fuming and chaffing in the sitting-room for 25 minutes. It was a dingy apartment with a single large horsehair chair and half a dozen small wooden dittos placed with mathematical precision along the walls. A square table in the center and a shabby mirror over the mantelpiece completed the furniture. With the instinct of an old campaigner, the Major immediately dropped into the armchair, and leaning luxuriously back, took a cigar from his case and proceeded to light it. Ezra Girdlestone seated himself near the table and twisted his dark mustache, as was his habit when collecting himself. What will you drink? He asked. Anything that's going. Fetch in a decanter of brandy and some seltzer water, said Ezra to the waiter. Then shut the door and leave us entirely to ourselves. When the liquor was placed on the table, and he drank off his first glass at a gulp, and then refilled it, the Major placed his upon the mantelpiece beside him without tasting it. Both were endeavoring to be at their best and clearest in the coming interview, and each set about it in his own manner. I'll tell you why I wanted to have a chat with you, Major, Ezra said, having first opened the door suddenly and glanced out as a precaution against eavesdroppers. I have to be cautious because what I have to say affects the interest of the firm. I wouldn't for the world have anyone know about it except yourself. What is it, me boy? The Major asked with languid curiosity, puffing at his weed and staring up at the smoke-blackened ceiling. You understand that in commercial speculation the least breath of information beforehand may mean a loss of thousands on thousands. The Major nodded his head as a sign that he appreciated this fact. We have a difficult enterprise on which we are about to embark, Ezra said, leaning forward and sinking his voice almost to a whisper. It is one which will need great skill and tact, though I may be made to pay well if properly managed. You follow me? His companion nodded once more. For this enterprise we require an agent to perform one of the principal parts. This agent must possess great ability and at the same time be a man on whom we can thoroughly rely. Of course, we do not expect to find such qualities without paying for them." The Major grunted a hearty acquiescence. "My father," continued Ezra, "wanted to employ one of our own men. We have numbers who are capable in every way of managing the business. I interfered, however. I said that I had a good friend named Major Toby's Clutterbuck, who was well qualified for the position. I mentioned that you were of the blood of the old Silesian kings. Was it not right?" "Beg you were not Milesian, sir. Milesian." "Ah, Milesian. It's all the same." "It's nothing of the sort," said the Major indignantly. "I mean it was all the same to my father. He wouldn't know the difference. Well, I told him of your high descent, and that you were a traveller, a soldier, and a man of steady and trustworthy habits." "Eh?" ejaculated the Major involuntarily. "Well, all right, go on." "I told him all this," said Ezra slowly, "and I pointed out to him that the sum of money which he was prepared to lay out would be better expended on such a man than on one who had no virtues beyond those of business." "I didn't give you credit for so much sense," his companion exclaimed with enthusiasm. "I said to him that if the matter were left entirely in your hands, we could rely upon its being done thoroughly. At the same time, we should have the satisfaction of knowing that the substantial sum which we are prepared to pay our agent had come into worthy hands." "You hit it there again," murmured the veteran. "You were prepared, then," said Ezra, glancing keenly at him, "to put yourself at our orders on condition that you are well paid for it?" "Not so fast, me young friend, not so fast," said Major, taking his cigar from between his lips and letting the blue smoke curl round his head. "Let's hear what it is that you want me to do, and then I'm ready to say what I'll agree to and what I won't. I remember Jimmy Baxter in Texas." "Hang Jimmy Baxter!" Ezra cried impatiently. "That's been done already," observed the Major calmly. "Lynched for horse stealing in '66. However, go on, and I'll promise not to stop you until you have finished." Thus encouraged, Ezra proceeded to unfold the plan, upon which the fortunes of the house of Girdlestone depended. Not a word did he say of ruin or danger, or the reasons which had induced this speculation. On the contrary, he depicted the affair of the firm as being in a most nourishing condition, and this venture as simply a small, insignificant offshoot from their business, undertaken as much from amusement as from any serious purpose. Still he laid stress upon the fact that though the sum in question was a small one to the firm, yet it was a very large one in other men's eyes. As to the morality of the scheme, that was a point which Ezra omitted entirely to touch upon. Any comment upon that would, he felt, be superfluous when dealing with such a man as his companion. "And now, Major," he concluded, "provided you lend us your name and your talents to help us in our speculation, the firm are prepared to meet you in a most liberal spirit in the matter of remunerations. Of course, your voyage and your expenses will be handsomely paid. You will have to travel by steamer to St. Petersburg, provided that we choose the Ural Mountains as the scene of our imaginary find. I hear that there is high play going on aboard these boats, and with your well-known skill, you will no doubt be able to make the voyage an remunerative one. We calculate that at the most you will be in Russia about 3 months. Now the firm thought that it would be very fair if they were to guarantee you £250, which they would increase to 500 in case of success. Of course, by that we mean complete success, such as would be likely to attend your exertions. Now had there been any third person in the room during this long statement of the young merchant's, and had that third person been a man of observation, he might have remarked several peculiarities in the Major's demeanour. At the commencement of the address he might have posed as the very model and type of respectable composure. As the plan was gradually unfolded, however, the old soldier began to puff harder at his cigar until a continuous thick grey cloud rose up from him, through which the lurid tip of the Havana shone like a murky meteor. From time to time he passed his hand down his puffy cheeks, as was his custom when excited. Then he moved uneasily in his chair, cleared his throat huskily, and showed other signs of restlessness, all of which were hailed by Ezra Girdlestone as unmistakable proofs of the correctness of his judgment, and of the not unnatural eagerness of the veteran on hearing of the windfall which chance had placed in his way. When the young man had finished, the Major stood up with his face to the empty fireplace, his legs apart, his chest inflated, and his body rocking ponderously back and forwards. "Let me be quite sure that I understand you," he said. "You wish me to go to Russia?" "Quite so," Ezra remarked, rubbing his hands pleasantly. "You have the goodness to suggest that on me way I should look me fellow passengers in the boat? That is to say, if you think it worth your while." "Quite so. If I think it worth my while, I am then to proceed across the country to some mountains, the Earls, and there I am to pretend to discover certain diamond mines, and am to give weight to my story by the fact that I am known to be a man of good birth, and also by exhibiting some rough stones which you wish me to take out with me from England?" "Quite right, Major," Ezra said encouragingly. "I am then a telegraph or write this lie to England and get it inserted in the papers?" "That's an ugly word," Ezra remonstrated. "This report, we will say. A report may be either true or false, you know." "And by this report, then," the Major continued, "you reckon that the market will be so affected that your father and you will be able to buy and sell in a manner that will be profitable to you, but by which you will do other people out of their money?" "You have an unpleasant way of putting it," said Ezra with a forced laugh, "but you have the idea right." "I have another idea as well," roared the old soldier, flushing purple with passion. "I've an idea that if I was 20 years younger, I'd see whether you'd fit through that window, Master Girdlestone. Yet I'd have taught you to propose such a scheme to a man with blue blood in his veins, you scoundrel." Ezra fell back in his chair. He was outwardly composed, but there was a dangerous glitter in his eyes, and his face had turned from a healthy olive to a dull yellow tint. "You won't do it," he gasped. "Do it? D'ye think that a man who's worn Her Majesty's scarlet jacket for 20 years would dirty his hands with such a trick? I tell ye I wouldn't do it for all the money that ever was coined. Look here, Girdlestone, I know you, but by the law you don't know me." The young merchant sat silent in his chair, with the same livid colour upon his face, and savage expression in his eyes. Major Toby's Clutterbuck stood at the end of the table, stooping forward so as to lean his hands upon it, with his eyes protuberant and his scanty grey fringe in a bristle with indignation. "What right had you to come to me with such a proposal? I don't set up for being a saint, Lord knows, but be George, I've some morals, such as they are, and I mean to stick to them. One of me rules of life has been never to know a blackguard, and so, me young friend, from this day forth you and I go on our own roads. Gid, I'm not particular, but you must draw the line somewhere, as me friend Charlie Monteith of the Indian Horse used to say when he cut his father-in-law. I draw it at you." While the Major was solemnly delivering himself of these sentiments, Ezra continued to sit watching him in a particularly venomous manner. His straight, cruel lips were blanched with passion, and the veins stood out upon his forehead. The young man was a famous amateur bruiser, and could fight a round with any professional in London. The old soldier would be a child in his hands. As the latter picked up his hat preparatory to leaving the room, Ezra rose and bolted the door upon the inside. "It's worth £5 in a police court," he muttered to himself, and nodding up his great hands, which glittered with rings, he approached his companion with his head sunk upon his breast, his eyes flashing from under his dark brows, and the slow, stealthy step of a beast of prey. There was a characteristic refinement of cruelty about his attack, as though he wished to gloat over the helplessness of his victim, and give him time to realize his position before he set upon him. If such were his intentions, he failed signally in producing the desired effect. The instant the Major perceived his maneuver, he pulled himself up to his full height, as he might have done on parade, slipped his hand beneath the tails of his frock coat, produced a small glittering implement, which he levelled straight at the young merchant's head. "A revolver," Ezra gasped, staggering back. "No, a deranger," said the veteran blandly. "I got into the thick of carrying one when I was in Colorado, and I have stuck to it ever since. You never know when it may be useful." As he spoke, he continued to hold the black muzzle of his pistol in a dead line with the center of the young man's forehead, and to follow the latter's movements with a hand which was as steady as a rock. Ezra was no coward, but he ceased his advance and stood irresolute. "Now then," cried the Major in a short military accent, "undo that door." The young merchant took one look at the threatening, apoplectic face of his antagonist, and another at the ugly black spot which covered him. He stooped and pushed back the bolt. "Now open it. Ged, if you don't look alive, I'll have to blow a hole in you after all. You wouldn't be the first man I've killed, nor the last, maybe." Ezra opened the door precipitately. "Now walk before me into the street." It struck the waiters at Nelson's well-known restaurant as a somewhat curious thing that the two customers should walk out with such very grave faces in so unsociable a manner. "Qu'est la friggin' église?" remarked little Alphonse Lefanu to a fellow exile as they passed in the laying of tables to observe the phenomenon. Neither of them noticed that the stout gentleman behind, with his hand placed jauntily on his breast of his coat, was clutching the brown handle of a pistol. There was a hansom standing at the door, and Major Clutterbuck stepped into it. "Look ye here, Girdlestone," he said, as the latter stood looking sulkily up and down the street. "You should learn a lesson from this. Never attack a man unless you're sure that he's unarmed. You may get shot if you do." Ezra continued to stare gloomily into vacancy, and took no notice of the late companion's remark. "Another thing," said the Major, "you must never take it for granted that every man you meet is great a blackguard as yourself." The young merchant gave him a malignant glance from his dark eyes, and was turning to go, but the gentleman in the cab stretched out his hand to detain him. "One more lesson," he said. "Never funk a pistol unless you are sure there's a cartridge inside. Mine hadn't. Drive on, cabby." With which parting shot the gallant Major rattled away down Piccadilly with a fixed determination never again to leave his rooms without a few of Ellie's No. 4 Central Fires in his pocket. End of Chapter 14.